No one notices the person who folds the towels. Not until she stops. When I left my job at the law firm 2 years ago, I didn't think I was leaving forever. We agreed it was temporary, Scott and I. Back then, Dylan was just 5, Maisie had barely turned 2, and Scott had just landed a promotion that came with a shiny title and a brutal travel schedule. Regional manager. Logistics chain. 3-state territory. Someone needs to be home, he said, and he was right. I was exhausted too, juggling court deadlines and preschool drop-offs, eating lunch at my desk, timing breast pumps between client meetings. We did the math. Daycare for 2 would eat half my salary. My firm didn't offer part-time. I told myself I'd take a year, reset, then return. We shook hands on it like equals. But somewhere along the way, just until things settle, became the new normal. My birthday fell on a Saturday that year. 35. The house was full, friends from book club, a few of Scott's coworkers, the neighbors we tolerated. Dylan had helped make guacamole. Maisie had drawn me a birthday card with hearts and stars and someone she swore was me, though it looked a lot like a potato. I had curled my hair. Worn the only dress I owned that wasn't machine washable. Cleaned the baseboards that morning, because I knew no one else would. The living room buzzed with conversation and the smell of good food. Scott had ordered Thai from the place I liked, though he got the wrong curry. I didn't say anything. He lit candles on a small cake. People clapped. I smiled. Then Beverly arrived. Uninvited, but of course she was coming. It was a social gathering, and Beverly never missed an opportunity to perform. She swept in wearing an emerald green shawl, perfume strong enough to stun, and carrying a box with gold wrapping paper and an enormous bow. She handed it to me dramatically, like she was presenting an Oscar. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Everyone turned. I peeled back the wrapping, fingers shaking slightly. I already knew it wouldn't be good. Beverly's gifts were rarely for me, they were little weapons, disguised as thoughtfulness. Inside the box, a child-sized toy vacuum cleaner. Hot pink. Glittery. With a sticker that said "Mommy's Little Helper." There was a pause. A weird, collective inhale. I smiled, because I had to, and held it up for everyone to see. Beverly beamed. "Well," she said, "since you spend so much time at home, I figured you might as well start training them early. Make it a family business." Laughter. Not from everyone, just enough to make me feel like maybe I was the joke. Scott chuckled under his breath. "Mom." "Oh, relax," Beverly said, waving a hand. "It's a joke. Come on, Erin has a sense of humor, doesn't she?" Everyone looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I smiled. Of course I smiled. The tight, polite kind, the kind that hides the sting behind teeth clenched too hard. "I love it," I said, and everyone relaxed. Maisie squealed with delight and immediately began pushing the toy across the floor, mimicking how I vacuumed. "DRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRR photo. Scott was already talking to someone else. Beverly helped herself to wine. And I stood in my clean kitchen, holding paper plates and plastic forks, watching my daughter pretend to be me, and everyone acting like that was the most natural thing in the world. That was the moment. The crack in the wall. The silence inside me stretched and snapped. I stayed up that night after everyone left, washing dishes no one thanked me for, listening to the buzz of the fridge and the toy vacuum rattling in the corner where Maisie left it. I should have thrown it out right then. Instead, I put it in the top of the hallway closet behind a stack of outgrown clothes and shut the door quietly. Then I sat at the kitchen table and started writing a list. Not a birthday wish list. A labor list. Every school drop-off and pediatrician visit. Every birthday party I planned, every load of laundry I folded, every 3 a.m. fever I handled alone while Scott was in Tulsa or Orlando or wherever logistics managers went. Every shoe I found, every meltdown I diffused, every sandwich crust I cut off. Every single thankless task that kept our family spinning, and never got noticed. I filled 3 pages. And then I opened a spreadsheet. 3 columns: task, frequency, professional equivalent. I priced myself out: housekeeper, nanny, cook, personal assistant. The market value of my daily life. The total came to $6,820 a month. I printed it. Left it on the kitchen counter for Scott to find. The next morning, he glanced at it while pouring coffee. He didn't laugh. Just said, "Wow. I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't," I said. "It's invisible work. But I do it. Every single day." He nodded. "Okay. I get it." But I knew he didn't. Because 2 days later, Beverly called. "You're making things uncomfortable," she said. No preamble. Just launched right in. "Scott says you were upset about the vacuum thing. You're being too sensitive." I gripped the phone. "No, I'm just done pretending I'm okay with being disrespected." Beverly sniffed. "It was a joke. It wasn't funny." Silence. Then she hung up. I stared at the receiver, heartbeat loud in my ears. That was the first time I pushed back. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. There's a sound I used to love, the click of courtroom doors closing behind me. It meant order. Structure. Someone would be heard. Maybe not me, but someone. Now, the only click I hear is the lid of the diaper pail locking shut, or the snap of the dishwasher. Sometimes I try to remember what I used to do with my days. I used to argue motions. Draft depositions. Review case law. Wear heels. I owned 2 blazers that made me feel 10 feet tall. I drank coffee hot. I was late for meetings because I was in demand. Now I'm late because someone smeared applesauce across the inside of the car window. People think being a stay-at-home mom is all cuddles and slow mornings. They picture pancakes in the shape of stars, story time under cozy blankets. They imagine peaceful walks with strollers, impromptu dance parties, the bliss of being there for every moment. They never picture the slow mental erosion. They don't know how many times a mother repeats herself before someone listens. They don't understand the kind of rage that grows quietly in your throat when a toddler screams because their banana broke in half. Or when your husband texts almost home and walks in 47 minutes later without explanation. There are no breaks. No doors to close. No separation of duties. Your body is public property: a lap, a milk machine, a pillow, a jungle gym. You're on from 6 a.m. to past midnight. And if you complain, people remind you, well, you chose this. Did I? Or did I adapt? Scott's promotion came with a company car, a higher salary, and a schedule no one else in the house could keep up with. He was gone most Mondays before sunrise and didn't return until late Thursdays. Fridays were office days, which meant endless Zoom calls and emails while I tiptoed around with the kids like we were burglars in our own home. He stopped asking about Dylan's new speech exercises. He forgot the name of Maisie's pediatrician. I left notes on the fridge, bullet points to remind him what was happening in the lives of the people who worshipped him when he walked through the door. He was still a good dad. That's what people said. And it was true, in the way that good meant present when convenient. Daddy's home, the kids would scream. And I'd watch from the kitchen window as he scooped them up in that effortless, heroic way men do when they haven't been there for the tantrums and the bedtime battles. I was the rules. He was the reward. Mornings were the worst. The house would still be dark, Dylan already whining about socks, Maisie crying because she wanted the red cup, not the blue one. I'd pack snack boxes while reheating the coffee I never drank fresh. Every task had a system: diaper sizes labeled by drawer, laundry sorted by child, grocery lists in a shared app that only I opened. I had to be efficient, no one else could afford my mistakes. If I forgot to mention Dylan's peanut allergy during a playdate, it could be a hospital visit. If Scott forgot to tell me he was flying out a day early, I was expected to just adjust. By 9 a.m., I'd already made 15 decisions, wiped 2 butts, diffused 3 meltdowns, and made it to preschool drop-off without crying. I deserved a medal. I got silence. The loneliness crept in slow, disguised as routine. There were days I didn't speak to another adult until Scott got home. And even then, he was half there, answering emails between bites of reheated dinner, nodding vaguely as I updated him on speech evaluations and Maisie's tantrums. Sometimes I caught myself narrating my day out loud. To no one. Just to fill the quiet. And the worst part? I felt guilty for feeling anything at all. I wasn't being abused. Scott wasn't cruel. I had healthy kids, a roof over my head, a pantry full of goldfish crackers. Who was I to be unhappy? But the more I ignored the ache, the louder it got. Beverly didn't help. Her comments were always sugar-dipped and sharpened to wound. So what do you do all day? She'd ask, smiling. I mean, when the kids are napping. Must be nice. Or, Caroline just submitted a research proposal while nursing twins. Isn't that something? She'd tilt her head, look at me like I was a decorative pillow. You used to work in law, right? Shame to waste that degree. Scott never defended me. He always said, she didn't mean it like that. But she did. Of course she did. The toddler moms at Maisie's music class weren't much better. They meant well, I think. But they spoke a language I didn't know how to fake. They talked about gentle parenting and no toy zones and using calm voices even when their kid hit someone with a tambourine. I was the mom who handed out raisins from my purse and pretended I didn't hear myself sigh out loud. At night, I'd scroll Instagram, all the curated motherhood accounts with clean kitchens and Montessori shelves and soft pastels. I'd watch reels of women lighting candles and writing in gratitude journals while their children sat quietly doing puzzles. Meanwhile, I was eating crusts off abandoned sandwiches and hiding in the bathroom to cry. One night, after a particularly long day of toddler chaos and preschool tears, I sat on the edge of the bed while Scott scrolled through his phone. Do you ever think about me? I asked. He looked up. What? I mean, the me before this. The woman you married. Do you miss her? He frowned. You're still you. But I wasn't. And he didn't notice. That was the worst part, not the change itself, but how easily I disappeared without anyone realizing. I didn't leave right away. I'm not a fool. I'm not dramatic. But something shifted. I started writing again. Not essays or case briefs, just private thoughts, saved in a hidden notes app folder. I wrote lists of things I wanted to remember. Things I didn't want to become. Things I used to dream about. I stopped folding Scott's laundry. Not out of spite, I just stopped seeing the point. When he asked where his socks were, I said, where you left them. When Beverly called to brag about Caroline's keynote at a conference, I said, that's nice, and hung up. When the toy vacuum reappeared, Maisie had found it again and started pushing it around the house like it was her birthright. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not rage. Not even sadness. Just grief. Grief for the woman who used to argue in courtrooms. Grief for the woman who used to be seen. There's a certain type of compliment that feels like a slap. Beverly had mastered them. You always make such practical choices, she'd say, I sweeping over my worn jeans and sneakers as if they were worthy of a historical exhibit. Maisie seemed so spirited, she'd note after my daughter screeched her way through lunch. Just like Dylan was at that age. You must be exhausted. I always smiled. Smiling made things easier. Then there was Caroline. Caroline, with her postdoctoral grants, and her dual-language toddlers, and her Instagram-worthy home office with a fiddle-leaf fig tree she somehow kept alive. Caroline, the wife of Scott's younger brother Jeremy, who worked in IT, made homemade sourdough, and once ran a half marathon just to try something new. Caroline was everything Beverly wanted in a daughter-in-law. And she made sure I knew it. The praise came in waves. Caroline just got another grant approved. Beverly would beam across the dinner table. It's a study on bilingual cognitive development. She's presenting at a conference next month. In Chicago. I would nod, chewing salad that tasted like sand. She even found time to make cupcakes for the preschool fundraiser, Beverly added, as if that act somehow qualified for sainthood. Scott would grunt a vague, "That's great," while refreshing his inbox. Meanwhile, Maisie smeared mashed potatoes across the placemat, and Dylan asked if smart people got extra birthdays. I wanted to scream. Not because Caroline was impressive. She was. And kind. And organized. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that I wasn't allowed to be enough in my own right. Only less than someone else. Every time Beverly spoke about Caroline, I wasn't hearing praise. I was hearing an echo, "Why can't you be more like her? Caroline never did anything wrong." That's what made it worse. She didn't gloat. She didn't show off. She didn't even realize Beverly was using her as a weapon. When we were alone at family events, she made polite small talk, complimented Maisie's curls, asked where I bought Dylan's backpack. She told me once that she envied how calm I seemed. I nearly laughed in her face. If only she could see me in the pantry, stress-eating stale granola bars while hiding from my children. At Thanksgiving the year after the toy vacuum incident, Beverly pulled me aside in the kitchen. I was arranging a platter of cranberry brie bites, a Pinterest recipe I followed to the letter, and she said, "You know, Caroline would love this spread. She's always saying she doesn't have time to get creative with appetizers. But you're very resourceful." The words landed like breadcrumbs on a trap. I didn't take the bait. But I felt it, the tug in my chest, the sense that no matter what I did, it would always be just that, resourceful. Not brilliant. Not meaningful. Just convenient. Scott didn't see it. Or if he did, he didn't care enough to say something. When I brought it up, tentatively, carefully, he sighed. "You're reading too much into it. She compares me to Caroline every time we see her." "She likes Caroline," he said, shrugging. "What's wrong with that? She never talks to me like that. She talks about me. Around me." Scott rubbed his temples like I was giving him a headache. "You've been on edge lately," he said. "Maybe you just need a break." "I don't get breaks," I snapped. "That's the whole point." At some point, I stopped trying to defend myself. Not out of surrender, out of conservation. My voice had become a currency I couldn't afford to spend on people who weren't listening. Instead, I started noticing things. Like how Beverly never called me directly anymore, she sent Scott with messages. Or how Caroline's kids got educational board games for Christmas, while mine got noisy plastic toys from the clearance bin. How Scott praised Caroline's research updates but never once asked about the article I tried writing during nap times. I never finished it. How my contributions were practical. Predictable. Peripheral. But Caroline? Caroline was possibility. And that was what stung. There was a night, late November, when I found myself awake at 3 a.m., standing in the laundry room in mismatched socks and a stained t-shirt, folding a pile of Dylan's pajamas. I caught my reflection in the narrow glass of the window, pale, hunched, older than I remembered, and I whispered aloud. "This isn't me." It wasn't dramatic. Just true. I didn't belong to this version of myself. I was borrowing a life that didn't fit. A few days later, Dylan came home from preschool holding a scribbled paper flower. "For you," he said. "It's a thank you flower. Teacher says we should give them to people who help." I crouched to his level. "Help with what, baby?" "Everything," he said. "You help with everything." My throat caught. I pressed the flower to my chest. Not because I needed validation from a child. but because it was the only real thank you I'd gotten in months. Beverly called that same night. She wanted to talk about Christmas logistics. Or maybe she just wanted to talk. It didn't matter. Halfway through the conversation, she said, "I know things are hard when you give up your career. But not everyone can balance motherhood and meaning, like Caroline can." There it was. The echo again. Only this time, I didn't nod. I didn't agree. I said, "I never gave up meaning. I gave up income." There's a difference. Beverly paused. "You're very sensitive lately." "No," I said, "I'm just finally hearing myself. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't need shouting. Scott used to be my ally. Or I thought he was. Back when we were first dating, he told me, my mom's a lot. She means well, but she can be intense." I'd laughed then, thinking it was one of those harmless family quirks. The kind you work around. The kind you grow into. What I didn't know was that I'd eventually become the problem Beverly would try to solve, and that Scott would let her. It started subtly. A comment here. A look there. After the toy vacuum incident, something shifted in the air between us. Scott didn't mention it the next day. Or the day after. He acted like nothing had happened. Like my birthday wasn't hijacked. Like the mockery didn't echo through our home long after the guests had left. I brought it up a week later, while we were cleaning up dinner. The kids were watching a show in the living room. I dried the dishes, he rinsed them. "I didn't like what your mom did," I said. Scott didn't look up. "What, the toy vacuum thing?" "Yes." He shrugged. "It was just a dumb joke. That's how she is." "I don't care how she is." "It was humiliating." "And you didn't say anything." Scott sighed, placing a plate a little too hard in the rack. "You're really going to make this into a thing?" "It is a thing. You know what she's like, Aaron. Getting worked up doesn't help." "I'm not worked up. I'm asking you to see me." He dried his hands and walked out of the kitchen. Conversation over. From then on, every time Beverly made one of her harmless comments, I waited. Waited for him to step in. Waited for him to say, "Enough, Mom." Waited for him to notice how I'd flinch when she praised Caroline's work-life balance or when she joked about how some women just aren't built for careers. He never did. Instead, he got quieter. Colder. As if my discomfort was the real inconvenience. One Sunday afternoon, Beverly came over unannounced, again. I was in the middle of sorting winter clothes, knee-deep in bins and toddler jackets. The doorbell rang, and there she was, arms crossed, lips pursed like she was doing a welfare check. "I brought some leftovers," she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. I glanced at the bags in her hands. Foil-covered Tupperware labeled in perfect cursive, Scott's favorite. She didn't say hi to the kids. Didn't ask how I was. She set the food on the counter and looked around like she was inspecting a rental unit. "You know," she said, "when I was your age, I had 3 under 5 and still found time to volunteer at the church." I didn't answer. "I guess the world just keeps lowering expectations," she added, walking out before I could form a reply. That night, I told Scott what she'd said. He rubbed his eyes. "I'm tired, Aaron." "So am I," I whispered. He got up. Brushed his teeth. Got into bed. Rolled away from me. And that was the night I realized, he's not just avoiding conflict. He's avoiding choosing me. Later that week, I overheard him on the phone with her. I wasn't snooping, just happened to be folding laundry in the hallway when I heard his voice through the crack in the bedroom door. "No, she's just been tense lately." "I don't know, maybe it's the kids. She gets sensitive about stuff." I try not to push. A pause. A chuckle. Then, "Yeah, you know how she is." And right then, I did something I'd never done before. I dropped the pile of towels, walked into the room, and stared straight at him. He froze. I heard you, I said. Erin. You told her you try not to push me. Like I'm unstable. That's not what I meant. You didn't defend me. You explained me. Like I'm a burden. Scott stood up. You're twisting this. No, I said. I'm hearing it clearly for the first time. The silence between us grew thicker after that. It wasn't a cold war. It was passive compliance. He still kissed me goodbye in the morning. Still sent check-in texts. Still thanked me when I dropped off dry cleaning or picked up his prescription. But it was all surface. Underneath, there was nothing. No curiosity. No warmth. No effort. Like I was the receptionist in his life, pleasant, necessary, replaceable. A week later, Beverly invited us to brunch. Or rather, told Scott there'd be brunch and assumed we'd attend. I said no. Scott blinked. You always go. I'm not in the mood to be condescended to over eggs. She's your mother. She's your mother. So you're just going to punish me? I stared at him. Do you even hear yourself? This isn't about you. He looked at me like I was speaking a language he'd forgotten. And maybe I was. Because I wasn't being nice anymore. I wasn't smoothing edges. I wasn't letting things go. I was changing. And change made him uncomfortable. That night, he texted her from the bathroom. I saw her name on the screen when it lit up beside his toothbrush. He turned it face down. And I knew. He didn't need to cheat to betray me. He just needed to believe her version of me more than mine. The gift. A week before Thanksgiving, I found myself typing at midnight, careful and deliberate. The gift, a limited edition silk scarf from Paris, in emerald green. Months earlier, Beverly offhandedly mentioned she'd always admired something elegant, from Europe, like they do in the movies. I'd kept the memory and found the scarf on a boutique site, not because I wanted approval, but because I believed gentle gestures could build bridges. I wrapped it carefully in gold tissue paper, no sarcastic note, no jab. Just. For Beverly, with respect. I placed it on the mantel, replacing my usual mom's side dish fold gift of casseroles and cookies, small, but heartfelt. Thanksgiving morning felt heavy in the best way. The turkey roasted itself for hours in the oven. I made cream of mushroom soup and candied sweet potatoes. I baked pies fresh, using my grandmother's recipe. I set the table with linen napkins, polished silverware, and place cards, not to show off, but to show care. When I looked around the table, I saw my intention, family all together. Conversations bubbling, cousins laughing loudly, kids chasing each other with laughter. I'd hoped for healing. Beverly arrived, as usual, with Caroline at her side. Caroline radiated calm confidence, balanced, glowing. Beverly greeted me with a tight smile. I offered her a seat. I caught Scott's eye, a flicker of pride? Or relief? Either way, I nodded and sat. After dinner, we moved to the living room for a new tradition Beverly introduced, giving early Christmas gifts. It's her way of asserting generosity and control. When it was my turn, I stood with the small package. No card, I said. Just a scarf I thought you might enjoy wearing this season. Beverly's long fingernails unwrapped it slowly. She held it against her neck, turning to admire it. Then she paused. Well, she said, voice even, that's bold. The room tensed. You could hear a butter knife drop. I don't usually wear things this flashy, she added with a perfunctory laugh. But I guess that makes sense, some people just don't know subtlety. Laughter broke, at first polite, then louder. Caroline sipped her wine, looking down. Scott took a breath. I stood slowly, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I spent days choosing this, I said, my voice steady. Not to make a statement. Not for approval. But because I wanted you to feel seen. Silence. Instead, I continued, you made it into a joke. Again. I looked directly at Beverly. This isn't about style. It's about tone. It's about respect. Heads turned. The kids stopped playing. The room felt electric. I am not a costume accessory, I said. I am the one who cooked this meal, who cares for those you're visiting with smiles and casseroles. I am not invisible. Not anymore. My voice didn't waver. It wasn't anger. It was clarity layered with exhaustion. Beverly's face was a mask, transitioning from surprise to offense. Oh, for heaven's sake, Aaron, she said. It's Christmas. We're family. Don't be so dramatic. Scott didn't say anything. He looked down. I felt the final crack. I'm done, I said softly. I'm just done. I picked up my purse and walked toward the front door. Maisie tugged at my sleeve. Dylan stood frozen. I knelt and hugged them both. Mommy's fine, I said. I didn't turn back. No one stopped me. Not Scott. Not Beverly. Not Caroline. They all looked at each other as I walked out. I shut the door. And at first, there was just silence. Then I stepped into the cold night, purse heavy on my arm, kids in my arms. And I felt it, the clarity of it all. In the car, rearview mirror reflected two sleepy faces and tired eyes of their mother. I pulled to a stop by my sister's house. In that moment, I realized, this was no longer about forgiveness or peace. It was about me reclaiming space. I inhaled the cold air. It burned. But it was real. First morning away. I woke up in my sister Molly's spare room, the curtains half closed, the air crisp and unfamiliar. Dylan and Maisie were still asleep in their bunk beds. I took a breath and closed my eyes, finally letting the quiet fill me. It was mine. The house smelled like fresh sheets. Not dishwasher soap or spilled juice. I stayed in that small bed, thinking, this is okay. For the first time in years, I didn't smile to fill the void. I just stayed still. Just existed. That afternoon, Molly took the kids to the playground. I unpacked a box of photos from our past, graduation beaming with excitement, my first ever brief at the firm, our wedding with small smiles and hopeful eyes. I touched each one, letting the memories remind me who I used to be. I found the article draft I'd abandoned months ago, half-finished paragraphs meandering through iambic pentameter. I read a paragraph. Then 3. Then I deleted them all. I didn't need meaning yet. I needed breathing space. He texted at 5 p.m. Not too soon, not too late. Can we talk? I replied, when you can leave us alone. 3 hours later, I saw him standing at the front door, backlit by streetlight, looking small. He carried 2 Tupperware containers, just like his mother used to. He knocked until I answered. I brought food, he said. His voice was soft, almost unfamiliar. I placed a hand on the frame. I don't want food. He sighed. I'm not here to argue. Then why are you here? He opened his hands. I haven't slept. Don't say you've missed us. He stopped. He swallowed the words. He set the containers down on the counter and looked at Dylan and Maisie, already quiet in Molly's kitchen. Look, I'm sorry. Not for everything. But for how things escalated. Can we try to figure this out? I watched him carefully. He pulled out 2 wooden spoons. Maybe I can stay this weekend. Help with the kids. Just, let's not make this permanent. I shook my head. This is permanent. He closed his eyes. I can go back to how things were. We'll keep things low-key. I'll put boundaries around her. Your mom. My mother. My heart stuttered. But I said, no. You have to do more than that. He met my gaze. Anything. There are no we in this right now, I said. I have taken our kids for a reason. He looked pained. We can figure out custody. I'll help. We can do mediation. His voice was the same calm I once found reassuring. Now it felt like a curtain I couldn't pull back. I spoke slowly. You need to pick a mother for our kids. He blinked. Of course I do. But you've already chosen one. He opened his mouth. I stopped him. I want joint custody. You want more access, fine. But not if it means ignoring what's happened. He shifted in place. It's not ignoring. It's trying to preserve family. Preservation hurts, I said. Sometimes you have to let something go. He remained silent. He took a step forward. So you're saying no to me being here with them this weekend? I met him head on. Yes. Something in his shoulders dropped. He closed his eyes again. Okay. I'll regroup. He left without another word. That night, Molly tucked the kids in. I sat on the couch listening to their soft breathing upstairs. For the first time, I realized I get to say no. Not just to Beverly's gifts or Scott's dismissive tone, but to anyone who pretends hearing me is optional. I didn't feel guilty. I felt something else. Relief. In the days that followed, Scott texted routines, "We'll pick them up Saturday. Want me to handle soccer sign-up?" I answered ray by ray, slowly, firmly. He didn't ask me how I was. He didn't say he missed me. He didn't seem to notice I'd changed tone. We drifted. The house phone calls felt foreign. The family facade was gone. Instead, I existed in freedom and truth, two things I'd forgotten I'd earned. Sometimes the loudest freedom is the one no one claps for. It comes quietly. In small mornings. In closing your own front door. In finally saying no without guilt and meaning it. Dear me. You won't believe how soft the silence feels when it's yours. No one hovering. No one asking, "What's for dinner?" while you're still drying your hands from doing dishes you never got thanked for. Just you. Your breath. Your thoughts. You will worry, in the beginning, that this piece is temporary. That someone will come knock and take it back. But no one does. Because this time you are not asking permission to keep it. You earned it. Not with noise, but with staying. Surviving. Leaving. Becoming. The kids laugh more now. Dylan told me last week, "You don't sigh as much anymore." It almost broke me. Not from pain, from relief. I didn't even know he'd noticed. Maisie colors pictures of strong moms and draws me with a cape. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like a woman who stopped pretending being invisible was noble. They don't ask about their grandma much anymore. And when they do, I tell them, some people love in ways that hurt, and some people don't know they're hurting. I don't need to punish. I just choose peace over proximity. Scott sent a message 2 weeks ago. "I hope you're happy," he wrote. I didn't reply. Not because I'm bitter, but because I am happy. And I don't need him to understand it to make it real. I bought myself a porch chair. Second hand. Worn but sturdy. It creaks when I lean back. I sit on it every evening after the kids are asleep. Sometimes with a book. Sometimes with nothing at all. And that, I think, is the most radical thing I've done. Nothing at all. No fixing. No proving. No hosting. No shielding. Just me. If I could speak to the woman I was, the one who smiled through insults, who kept folding towels hoping someone would say thank you, I would tell her this. You are not hard to love. You were just surrounded by people who loved conditionally. You don't have to bend to be worth staying. Real love will stand beside you, not over you. And to the woman I've become? I'd say this. You didn't break. You opened. You didn't leave because you gave up. You left because you remembered you were allowed to choose. I used to think love meant bending. Now I know. Real love is something you can stand tall in, without apology, without shrinking.